All right, class, you may remember that I said yesterday that it's not just the 26 letters in our alphabet that are vowels or consonants, but we can actually divide all 72 phonograms into either vowels or consonants. Or I guess we would say vowel sounds or consonant sounds. So we're going to review, or not quite review, but we're going to use our notebook and go over some of our other phonograms. All right, so go ahead and turn to page 4 in your notebook. You can tell I'm using a copy because mine was partially filled in. So if you started, let's see, if we were in first grade, after we had reviewed all our first 26 phonograms, the next ones we would have gone to would have been our ers. There's 5 different ways that we make the sound in English. I'm wondering, can you tell me if the sound, is that a vowel sound or a consonant? Why don't you say and see if anything's blocking the sound Class, are our are those vowel? Oh gosh, I didn't even see that it says it on the page. But you can tell me, class, is our sound, is that a vowel sound or a consonant sound? Right? I didn't even remember that it said vowel patterns there. So that kind of gave it away. The reason that I wanted us to call our attention to that is because you know how I've been kind of a stickler this year about us saying differently than this sound. Class, what sound does this make? Good, this says I've wanted to make sure that we're saying for this instead of because remember how every syllable has to have a vowel, or here it would be a vowel pattern, multi-letter vowel pattern. I want us to make sure we hear that and so that we know if, for example, we wanted to write the word her, I want us to know that we can't just write this. Because again, if we try and read this, it's her. Okay, it's not a word. All right, so I wanted, what else was I going to say? I don't see it as much with her, but a lot of times if we've got multisyllabic words, that means more than one syllable. So if we've got a 2 or 3 syllable word, I'll see a syllable that looks like this. And I think, oh gosh, we've got to make sure that we know that there's no vowel there. And so we need to have something that makes a vowel sound. So any of our every sound is a vowel sound since they're all the same. So just make sure we're thinking about that. If we need an sound, we've got to use one of our 5 We can't use Okay, we've got 5 and we have a sentence that helps us remember all of our If you remember that sentence, can you tell it to me? All right, it's a sentence that has all 5 words with our different in it. Our sentence is her hurt bird eats worms early. All right, class, can you say that with me? Her hurt bird eats worms early. All right, that means what's one of our Let's see, the first word in that sentence is her. It must be the of her. Go ahead and write that here. If you're not sure, you can do your practice paper first, but I think we all know that one. The of her. All right, let's say the sentence again. Her hurt bird eats worms early. All right, what's our next word in that sentence? Good, hurt. So our next must be the of hurt. All right, go ahead and write the of hurt on the second line. The of hurt. All right, let's say the sentence again. What's our next Her hurt bird. Oh, bird has an sound in it. So our next is the of bird. Go ahead and write it and say it while you write it. The of bird. All right. Her hurt bird eats worms. Class, what's our next Good. The of worms. All right, I don't want you to write it yet. Okay. The of worms is funny. It's the only phonogram of all of our phonograms where we write a letter, but we don't underline it because it's not part of our word. So I'm going to go ahead and write the of worms, but I'm going to put a letter before I write the And then I'm only going to underline these two letters. Class, the of worms. These two letters are the ones that say If this letter comes before it, they can say What do they say if that letter does not come before it, class? Good, they say or, but this letter lets them say All right, so the of worms. These are the two letters that work together to actually make that sound, but they cannot make that sound unless this comes before them. All right, so this one's pretty special. If you weren't sure about that one, why don't you go ahead and pause the video, write the of worms 3 times, say it while you write them, and make sure you're only underlining those two letters because this one doesn't say at all. It just lets those two say All right, let's say our sentence one more time so we know what our last is. Her hurt bird eats worms early. Good. Our last is the of early. Oh, I should see if you know it first before I write it. Go ahead and write the of early. If you're not sure, do it on your practice paper first. All right, this is our the of early. All right, now students are always, they look at that and they say, that looks like ear. Well, you're not wrong, right? But ear is actually different. These three letters together can say Ear, like what you hear with, we had this as a spelling word earlier. Remember, it's E using E-A, and then R. All right, so if we had ear, they wouldn't all be underlined. For the of early, all three are underlined. All right, so these are our 5 her, the of, what's this one? Good, the of her, the of hurt, the of, good, the of bird, the of, good, worms, and the of early. All right, and class, the reason that we have them in this order in our sentence, right, we just wrote them here because they're in that order in our sentence, is that is the order of how often we use them. You probably remember this one we use all the time. That's why we've been practicing it a lot. This is the one we use the most often. And then this one, and then this one, and then this one, and this is the one that we use the least often. So if I'm trying to spell a word and there's not a teacher there to help me out, and I know there's an sound when I'm taking the sounds apart, I would guess that it would be this because this is the one we use most. All right, so we want to remember that sentence. It's going to help us know the order of how often we use them. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and, well, later, I'll go ahead and write the sentence down for you. If you have time to copy it down later, it would not be a bad idea unless if you already have it memorized. You don't have to, but hey, it never hurts. All right, so here's our sentence. Let's read it one time. Her hurt bird eats worms early. Class, if you memorize that sentence, you're not going to have any trouble remembering what our 5 ers are. All right, for just a minute, let's pop up to the top of our page because this is a special section. Yesterday, we were doing our multi-letter vowel and consonant patterns, but then we've got some phonograms that get their own special section, like our ers. All right, so these ones, it says vowel pairs Y and I. That kind of reminds me how we were saying that since we can't use I at the end of English words, remember, because Y makes the same vowel sounds, if we need an I sound, or the sound I makes at the end of an English word, we trade in Y. Well, it's not just with I and Y by themselves. We also have some groups of phonograms. They have another letter, and then they have our Y and I, right? So our very first one here, so in this whole column, we're going to have a pair of phonograms here. The first letter is going to be the same between both of them. The last letter, one of them will be Y and one will be I. So for example, our first one is a 2-letter A that we do use at the end of English words. All right, class, if you remember that one, go ahead and write a 2-letter A that we do use at the end of English words. All right, this is our a 2-letter A that we do use at the end of English words. All right, so for a 2-letter A that we do not use at the end of English words, our first letter is going to be the same as in A that we do use at the end of English words. What's our last letter going to be instead of Y? Very good, it's going to be I. So go ahead and write a 2-letter A that we do not use at the end of English words. All right, this is our a 2-letter A that we do not use at the end of English words. All right, class, these ones are nice because if you remember that we don't use I at the end of English words and we use Y instead, if you remember a 2-letter A that we either do not or do use at the end of English words, it's going to help you remember the other one because the only thing that changes is that last letter. The first part of the phonogram stays the same. All right. Let's go ahead and hop over to this. So just like we have pairs of phonograms that make the same sounds, some end with Y, those are the ones we do use at the end of English words. Some end with I, those are the ones we do not use at the end of English words. Well, we've got the same exact thing with W and U. You may remember that English words do not end with U. So we've got pairs also with W and U. All right, so our first letter stays the same. The last letter, if it's that we do use at the end of English words, it's going to be a W. If it's that we do not use at the end of English words, it's going to be a U. So again, if we remember one phonogram that makes that sound, it's going to help us remember the other one, either that we do or do not use at the end of English words. Let's come down to the middle section here. This phonogram, for some reason, it's always given my students some trouble. Let's see if you remember. All right, our first, so under this first gray shaded area, first line below that, go ahead and write aw that we do use at the end of English words. Say it while you write it. All right, this is our aw that we do use at the end of English words. All right, that means if we look up top here and use what we've been talking about, you should be able to write "ah" that we do not use at the end of English words, right below that. All right, class, this is our "ah" that we do not use at the end of English words. So again, just like with our Y and I, with W and U, our first letter stays the same. The last letter changes because we can't use this at the end of English words. If it's that we do use at the end of English words, it has to have W at the end. All right, class, well, we will talk more about this tomorrow. We'll talk about our other kind of syllable too. But I thank you for working hard, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.